Welcome to Sundays at 7. My name's David. I know most of you, one or two, are new as ever. I'm your host for Sundays at 7, an evening of opportunity where we listen to a Christian who has a story to tell about his life and how God has worked in that life. Tonight, just before we begin, just a couple of things to mention to you, a couple of notices really. Because of the building next door and alterations, we only have one loo available tonight, and that's just here on the right-hand side. We normally have, loads of them, but tonight there's only one. That's life. Don't worry about it. If you want to go, just wait. It's difficult, but we've got the issues with the building at the moment. If, speaking of the building, you feel as a member of this church that you'd like to be involved in that building when it's finished in terms of things you might like to do, we've got some sheets on the side here. If you just put your name against a heading that you think might suit you, we want people for doing things like welcoming, tea making, sandwich making, greetings and so on. They're all written on the sheets here. If you haven't had a look already, look at the end of tonight and see if there's something that might suit you. The other thing to mention is that Graham Skinner, who's left to go to Carlisle, it's his induction on his installation on the 3rd of July, Tuesday. There's a coach going from St Mary's. It's leaving about 3:30, 4 o'clock. It's going to cost between £5 and £10 to take you there and £300 to come back. No, it's going to be £5 to £10. Stop it. It's going to cost about £5 to £10. If you'd like to go, there's a sheet over there. Put your name down. It's a 50-seater coach. I think we've got about 20, 25 places taken if you'd like to go. Tea and coffee will be served at the end of Sundays at 7, where you are. Please stay where you are, and it will be brought over to you. You don't have to go over there. It'll come here. You might like to talk amongst yourselves. You might like to go to somebody for prayer. There'll be people at the back with Sundays at 7 stickers who will pray with you if that's what you would like, in total confidence. Or you might like to come forward and have a word with our guest tonight who will be sitting here. Somebody said to me the other day, what makes a good interview? I don't know really. It could be something that's said that strikes with you. It could be something that you have an issue with and it's come along and it's been mentioned. It could be you just wanted to be quiet and you just wanted to listen to somebody's story. All those things might make a good interview. And then it struck me. About 5 weeks ago, I interviewed Stuart Townend, and most of you were here, and most of you said what a wonderful evening it was. He dropped in some absolute gems in that evening, but at the end of the evening, his daughter, who was sitting over there, who plays in his band, came forward all the way here, went straight to her dad and said, "Dad, I have learnt things about you tonight that I didn't know. Love you." And I thought, wow, that's powerful. That means his life came over not only to you, but to his own family. And that's special. So tonight's guest is currently the Archdeacon of, I think, Knowsley and Sefton. And he's been in ministry for many years. He's had a challenging life from birth through to now and beyond. He's married to Annie. They've got 4 children, grown-up children. He's been based in Liverpool. All his ministry has been in the Liverpool area. He's an unbelievable fan of Liverpool Football Club. He's got an awful, awful lot to share with you that I know you're going to take home with you, because it's a special story. Someone I think is an incredibly special guy. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Pete Spiers.
Thank you, Dave.
No pressure then.
Absolutely not. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. Pete, welcome. Now, just carrying on from what I said before, you were born in Speke in 1961. Your dad was vicar of St Aidan's in Speke, and you have an elder brother, Andrew. You told me that you were affected by the drug thalidomide, and neither your mum or dad knew this until you were born. Can you tell me a little bit about the events of that time and how it affected you in the early years?
Well, obviously, I didn't know personally myself, but getting it from mum and dad. Yeah, it was in the days before there were scans, in the days before the NHS knew and were able to join the dots up. So children were being born affected by the thalidomide, but they were being born in Aberdeen, London, Plymouth, all over the place, and people weren't working out what was common to these children being born. So I was born in August, and my mum remembers leaning out of the window on a lovely summer's afternoon and saying to the ambulance men who were in their deck chairs outside the ambulance station, which was right opposite the vicarage, saying, "I think I'm ready to go now." And they drove round, put her in the back, and they took her off to Oxford Street Maternity Hospital. And that's where I was born. It was a Sunday night. And my dad was doing the evening service. So when he got back after the evening service, the babysitter had said, "You better get up there and see." But by the time he got there, I'd been born. My mum remembers there being a sharp intake of breath when I was born, and they saw me. And but one of the midwives picked me up and brought me around to my mum and said, let's just have a little look at him, shall we? And that's when they discovered that I'd been born with short arms, 3 fingers on this, 4 fingers on that, a clubbed foot on my left, and a short leg on my right with a little foot on, which subsequently they were to amputate. And the midwife put me on my mum's in my arms and said, "What's he going to be called?" And she said, "Well, his brother's Andrew, so I'm going to call him Peter." And so it was a shock to my mum. When my dad came in, it was a shock to him because nobody knew what this was about. Was it their fault? Had they done something wrong? They didn't know until, well, that was near the end of the thalidomide drug being discovered as being the cause. They were working it out, and we were one of the last to be born in this country, I think.
Was that recently after, or a few years after
yeah,
that?
Yeah, it was about between 58 and 62 was when the drug was being used. Yeah. And I still get people coming up to me now, and they're able to tell my age just because as a mum, they were offered the drug and didn't use it or whatever. So it was just a shock, and we didn't know, and the fact, in a sense, it was irrelevant that it was thalidomide. It was just that I was born with multiple disability, and so that was going to be a challenge, and I was going to require a bit more help as I grew up.
Okay. You moved to Egbert in 1968, and you had to cope with lots of outpatients appointments at Alder Hay and also at Mill Road for prosthetics. Did that just become part of life for you? And how did you deal with it all? Were you made to feel different?
Well, obviously, yeah, I can remember, and even now, the colour of the folder for my notes in Alder Hay were red because I'd been going there for such a long time. So I always knew when I was going to be called. Inevitably, it was disruptive to schooling because I was often going off to outpatients department. I had some spells in hospital as well. I had 2 big operations on my leg when I was a bit older. So, of course, it was just the business of getting me through school. When we went to Grant Road, what was really interesting about that was because we were in a special school called Greenbank, and they wanted to integrate us. That was in the days before we didn't really know about integration. We didn't quite know what to do with people with disabilities. So this teacher called Pam Skelly, who was the head teacher of Grant Road in Dovecot, said, I'll take 12 of us thalidomiders in Liverpool, and they'll come and join the school and we'll integrate them. And that was really special, to go to a school and just be like everybody else. And I can remember one of my teachers, who I subsequently met many years later, he watched me playing football on the playground the first day I was there. And I don't know if you can remember primary school football, but everybody follows the ball. You don't have people that kind of go from one. So when the ball came near me, you had 20 or 30 kids running off. And I can remember standing there waiting for the ball to come to me, and it came to me, and then all these 20 or 30 kids came. So I was knocked over, and the teacher said, oh, heck, he's not going to be back on Monday. But when I was back on Monday, he said, he'll be all right. So Dovecot was really a happy time. I did a couple of years there, and then went to Sudley in Aigburth, which was a bit closer, and just enjoyed. But even at Sudley, when it came to official games, they would organise a special football match for me. So 6 guys were pulled out of the big game and asked to play with me, and I really hated that, because they were being almost like being punished to play with me. So I can remember saying to the teacher after a while, look, could I just join in with everybody else? And he said, well, you might get hurt. I said, don't worry about it. And so I had to take control and say, let me play with everybody else, please. So again, I just put that down to the fact that people didn't quite know how to cope with disability. Yeah. Thankfully, we moved on, and I think things are a lot better now than they were all those years ago.
There was a lot of things going on in your life at that time, different schools, hospital appointments and so on. Looking back, has there ever been times when you felt angry or bitter about your own situation?
Certainly. Teenage years were probably the tough. I can remember, and one of my old teachers here tonight, I remember my 5th form teacher saying to us, now look boys, there's the 3 B's I want you to remember: birds, booze and bikes. Okay? And I remember thinking about all of those 3, that there probably would be a no-no for me, you know, that no girl would be interested in going out with me. I certainly wouldn't get served underage, and certainly driving a motorbike was probably off limits. So I remember thinking, and certainly doing all 3 at the same time would be even more difficult. But I can remember that one comment made me realise how much different I was to everybody else. So I think during my teenage years that was quite difficult, and it really wasn't until I went to university that I discovered something that made a big difference.
Going on talking about education, you ended up at Liverpool College, and you did well in your O-levels. One of our church members, Rodney Lavin, was a teacher there at the time, and you remember him, he remembers you. I think you've met him tonight. You loved sport, as you said. And when I asked you to name one person outside your family who's been a huge influence on your life, thinking you'd come up with someone like Nelson Mandela or what have you, you said yes right away, Bill Shankly. And LFC. Why was that?
I think I've always, I've been a good armchair sports fan for a long time. And I can remember at college, I just wanted to encourage the team. So it was rugby and cricket. So I can remember going to watch lots of games of that, and standing on the touchline and just cheering people on, because I think that's really important. The reason I mentioned Bill Shankly was because he certainly, as we look back, he created a legacy for Liverpool Football Club that has been incredible. And one of the things was he saw the fans were really important, that they had a role to play, so that the people cheering on the team were as important as the team itself. And that's meant a lot to me, because that was a way of me being able to participate in the success of the team, although I wasn't going to obviously score the goals. Although I have to say, when I was at Theological College, I did end up the top scorer for our Theological College in the annual Ridley versus Westcott game. So that is my claim to fame. It was a complete fluke of a goal, but don't tell anyone else that. But
okay.
So I think, and I've loved Liverpool ever since. I think there's a passion there. There's a love of the game. There's a unity between the team and the fans. I think also Bill Shankly was a great psychologist. There's that famous story when Bobby Moore of West Ham came to Anfield and was up against Kevin Keegan. And Bill Shankly said to Kevin Keegan, "Don't worry about Bobby Moore. He's had a night in the nightclub and he's got a bit hungover." And what Bill Shankly was trying to say to Kevin Keegan is, "You're going to have the beating of this guy." And at the end of the game, Bobby Moore had played an absolute blinder, but so had Kevin Keegan. And what Bill Shankly had tried to do to Kevin Keegan was, you'll be all right against this guy, and not to be freaked out by it. So psychology is really important in sport, and helping people, and I guess in life as well. It's not being untruthful, but it's also helping people with the odd comment and encouraging them in their work, and that's been important to me.
You were very close to your dad, and sadly he passed away in 2008 following a long illness. Tell me a little bit about your dad and how his faith and yours were kind of locked together, and also about your reaction on the day of his funeral.
So my dad obviously was a Christian, being a vicar, and he was a very dutiful guy. He was a very pastoral guy, and I can remember for years the last thing I wanted to be was to be a vicar, having lived in a vicarage. And he always was out, and other people were important, and he had a great sense of service. He was a good preacher. I used to listen to him. I was in the choir, so I'd listen to him preach, and I used to think, "Oh, he's all right, that's good." And also what was really nice was that at Christmas time, we get loads and loads of presents from people in the parish. And just looking at the presents, I thought to myself, they must really like my dad if we've got all these boxes of chocolates and bottles of wine and whatever. So so when I got ordained in 1986, he was in the cathedral at the time. He was actually Archdeacon of Liverpool. And so that felt quite special. And so working with him until his retirement, as it were, and he was my Archdeacon at that time, so I had to be careful what I did and say, was lovely. And then he retired to Formby. He had a stroke 5 years before he died. And that was a very long, slow decline, and that was difficult for him because he was an active man, and he clearly found that very difficult. And just the realization that things like strokes can happen to anybody, and it's even people with faith. And that's quite an important thing. Sometimes people think Christians are immune from bad things happening, and that certainly wasn't the case for us. And went into a nursing home, and I remember when he died in the nursing home, and they'd looked after him really well. My mum typically didn't ring me straight away. She waited until about 6:30 and then rang me, so I went straight up to see. So we organised the funeral, and I remember thinking to myself, I want this to be not so much about my dad, but about the Jesus, the Lord and Saviour that my dad knew. I wanted it to reflect him. My dad had already spoken to the preacher he wanted to preach at his service, so that was lovely as well. And we had a great time. And I can remember after the service and after the do and saying goodbye to people, everyone, all the family came back to our house, went out for a Chinese, and then I can remember my mum saying, "Okay, I think I want to go home now." And that was the moment when I burst into tears, because it felt to me that was it. There was nothing more I could do for my dad. And that's when it all came spilling out. But also realizing that a few days later, it was Sunday, my dad would have said, "For goodness sake, just get on with it. I want you to do what you'd normally do," because that's what I would have done. Yeah. And obviously I didn't do a funeral immediately, and I think I was just down to lead a service, and that was fine. And the church were great, but in many ways he's been an inspiration to me, and I just think he would just say, just keep on going and keep on buzzing, because that's what he did. And he had to put up with me all those years, so why not?
You made a personal commitment to Jesus in February 1980 whilst attending St John's College in Durham. How did that come about?
So I was just minding my own business, trying to get some work in, a Latin unseen for Mr. Lavin, who's here tonight. And I really wasn't it wasn't really going anywhere. And someone knocked on the door. And Judy, who's a third year, I was a first year, said, Pete, I'm going to hear this mission talk tonight. Would you like to come with me? And I thought anything than complete my Latin unseen. So I went with Judy. And I sat there. And honestly, it was, I must have heard the facts that Jesus had died for me hundreds of times before. I mean, singing in the church choir and being there twice or something. But that night was in a completely different way. And, you know, I don't think the guy was the greatest preacher, but it was as if he was speaking to me. And suddenly all these things came to the surface. So the things about I was different, I was thinking to myself, God must really hate me to make me like this. I must have done something wrong in a previous life to make me like this. How could he love me like this? I was a mistake after all. And the guy was saying, none of us are mistakes. We're all unique and precious. And Jesus died for each one of you. And I thought, wow, well, if Jesus died for me, you know, even though he knows everything about me, can see everything about me, then that is really good news. And I was kind of having this dialogue in my brain about all this. And I remember thinking, well, Lord, if you've given your life to me, I'm going to give my life to you. And I looked up and I made that commitment along with lots of other students. And I walked out that hall and that literally changed my life. And I've been trying to respond to his love every day of my life ever since.
Wow. You first met your wife, Annie, who's here tonight, at Durham in 1981. But you didn't start going out with each other for another 5 years. But you were married in 1988. Tell me about Annie, particularly as she's sitting there. And more importantly, how did you end up on the centre pages of the News of the World?
Oh, God, lots of questions there. Well, first of all, Annie's very slow on the uptake when it comes to men. So I had to try really hard to convince her that I was really interested in her. I think the problem was that the reason why she was in Durham was because her sister was a student. And so Annie came to visit Lizzie, and that's how I met Annie. And I think Annie for years felt, well, Pete's just Lizzie's friend. But actually, I was very keen on Annie. So Annie's been a Christian all her life, or since 3 or 4. For those of you who know the song, Who's the King of the Jungle, Annie wrote that. So that's her big claim to fame.
Really?
And we live off the royalties from Who's the King of the Jungle. And she's written lots of other songs. When the penny finally dropped and she realized that I was really keen on her, it didn't take too long for us to start going out. She then announced I'm going to South America. She was going to South America for a year. Yeah. So I said to her, well, if you come back from South America not knowing that you want to marry me, it's all over, we're finished, we're through. Well, within a few months she was saying, that's it, I want to marry you. So it was fine, it worked out very well. So she came back in September 87. We got married in January 88, so not long. We got married in Bristol. She was in London doing a mime course. I was in Liverpool. So we organised it. I mean, how couples organise weddings today, I don't know. But it was, for us, it was, we just did it.
Yeah.
The reason why...
I was going to say, that's all very well and good.
Yeah, okay.
But what's that got to do with the News of the World?
Okay, so at the end of our wedding, the final piece of music that we wanted was not Vidor's Toccata. We wanted the Bare Necessities from the Jungle Book.
Really?
So we kept it quiet, and then the final song was the Bare Necessities. We danced down the aisle to the Bare Necessities. Now it got some column inches in one of the papers. We went off to, and this was the days before the internet. We went off for our honeymoon, and when we got back, I got a phone call from a journalist who said, "I read about your wedding, and it sounds wonderful. Can I come and interview you? I'm." And I said, well, who do you work for? And she said, Women's Own. And I thought, well, okay. So she came up with loads of daffodils, and she gave us some, we sat there and we talked, and we had a great time talking together. And at the end of the time, she had to go back and get a train. She said to us, are you enjoying being married? And Annie said, yeah, we love it, because now that we're married, we can stay together at night. Because being Christians, we didn't believe in sleeping together before we got married. And she said, oh, right, okay. So anyway, a few weeks passed, and I rang her up and said, you said you were going to let us know when we're going to be in the women's own. It's even better than that, she said. You're going to be in the news of the world. And of course, the news of the world did have that reputation. And I can remember, I said, okay. I remember going down to the newsagents and buying the news of the world that Sunday morning, coming back and having to go all the way through the paper. And we were on the centre pages. A really fantastic photograph, by the way, which we've still got. But the headline, and this is the one that cracks everyone up, is Tender Touch of My Virgin Bride by Armless Vicar. And when my church warden at the time, Alan, he said, if only they know you're not armless, Pete, you're bloomin' lethal. Anyway, my vicar at the time, he didn't, so I kept this quiet. And my vicar used to go around the pubs on a Sunday night, because that was his. And he rang me up when he got back, and he said, they're all talking about the curate's sex life in the local pub. He said, so I had to go and take a copy of the paper, and I don't think it was the truth was that apart from the headline, the story was incredibly accurate. Yeah. And it did give us an opportunity to tell our story. And we got 3 or 4 letters as a result from people who were saying, thank you very much for the story. But I'm not a big fan of the news of the world. I just want to say that.
Okay, very nice. The guys are going to come back now and play another song for us. Okay. As they're on their way back, just let me ask you, you've got 4 children. Yeah. Tell me, as they're coming, tell me a little bit about your 4 children.
So we have, I'm a bit dodgy on the ages, but they're 28 down to 20, I think that's right. So Hannah is 28, and she's living with the Chemin Neuf religious community in France, which is a kind of Roman Catholic but ecumenical community. Callum, who is 26, he is going, he loves ultimate frisbee, and he's coached the Great Britain under-23 frisbee team in the World Championships in Australia. But he also does music-y things. Lily has just finished her social work degree in Bristol and is trying to get a job. And Dylan, our youngest, just finished his 2nd year in Durham and hoping to be a teacher is his latest idea. They're both, he and Callum, it has to be said, they do ultimate frisbee most of the time. So I'm not sure how much academic work they are. But as someone said, they've grown up and flown. So
get on with
that's what they do.
In the second part, I want to talk to you about your ministry in Liverpool, answers to prayer, having your faith tested to the limit, and the things you're involved in today. So we look forward to that. In the meantime, Andy and Les.
Okay, well, we need a bit of help on this next one. We're going to sing a song that some of you may know, and it's called Shower the People. It's a James Taylor song. Just as a matter of interest, any of you know the song? Put your hand up if you do. We'll see if we've got any. There's 1 or 2. Yeah, good. Peter knows it, so he'll lead you on this. Don't worry. And towards the end of the song, there's a kind of a chorus that keeps going round, and Les will be singing that, and then I have to sing something else. But it's, if you listen to the record, they've got a big choir that's singing this phrase, and it's shower the people you love with love, show them the way that you feel. So can we just try that? See if you can remember it. Let's try it like, shower the people you love with love, show them the way that you feel.
Shower the people you love with love, show them the way that you feel.
Okay,
that's it.
So can we try that now?
Let's
just try
science.
all of you. Okay, ready?
3, 4. Shower the people you love with love, show them the way that you feel. And again. Shower the people you love with love, show them the way that you feel. And singing that while Andy ad-libs.
I go
other
on a bit of a bender doing something else, all right?
Yeah,
So,
as he's inclined to do now and again.
and again, it's a song, and Peter was talking about the love that he felt that Jesus felt for him, and I'm sure Jesus would have been a song that he would have approved of, to be honest. So here we go. It's called "Shower the People." You can play the game, you can act out the part, but you know it wasn't written for you. How can you stand there with a broken heart, ashamed of playing the fool? Oh, one thing can lead to another, it doesn't take any sacrifice. Father and mother, sister and brother, if it feels right, don't think twice, just shower the people you love with love. Show them the way that you feel. Things are gonna work out fine if you only do what I'm saying to you now. Shower the people you love with love. Show them the way you feel. Things are gonna be much better if you only will. You can run, but you cannot hide. This is widely known. Tell me what you plan to do with your foolish pride when you're all by yourself alone. Once you tell somebody the way that you feel, you can feel it beginning to ease. I think it's true what they say about a squeaky wheel always getting the grease. Better to shower the people you love with love. Show them the way that you feel. Things are gonna work out fine if you only will what I'm saying to you now. Shower the people you love with love. Show them the way that you feel. Things are gonna be much better if you only will. This is your turn. All together. Shower the people you love with love. Show them the way that you feel. Shower the people you love with love. Show them the way that you feel. Shower the people you love with love. Show them the way that you feel. Shower the people you love with love. Show them the way that you feel. Shower the people you love with love. Show them the way that you feel. Shower the people you love with love. Show them the way that you feel. Shower the people you love with love. Show them the way that you feel. Things are gonna work out fine if you only will what I'm saying to you now. Shower the people you love with love. Show them the way that you feel. Things are gonna be much better if you only will. Great, well done. Thank you. Give yourselves a hand. Thanks a lot.
Thank you to Andy and Les, as ever, for playing for us at Sundays at 7. Pete, you trained for ordination at Ridley Hall. You became a curate at St Luke's Highton, then team vicar at St Peter's Everton, and then vicar at St George's Everton. In your latter years at St George's Everton, which was 95 to 2005, there was a period, you told me, when your faith was tested to the limit. Why was that, and how did you get through it?
So I don't know if people know Everton at all. We had a vicarage on the highest part of Liverpool. So we had a great view over the city centre and stuff. But it's also a very deprived area. And I think there were just a series of events that had taken place. And when they all happened at the same time, that was quite tough. So all our children were born in Everton. So having a young family is always a bit of a challenge. I think the two things that really made a big impact was we had a youth leader in the local youth club who'd been there for about 35 years and who basically ran it as a bit of a personal fiefdom. And so the kids weren't able to get in there. And so there had been a long-standing relationship between the church and this youth club in terms of being trustees. And I could see what was happening, and I ended up being chair of trustees, and I realised I was going to have to confront this situation, which an audit gave us that opportunity, but it wasn't pleasant and it wasn't nice, and he didn't go quietly, as it were. And so it seemed like the whole area was up in arms, and we weren't able to say what was going on because, of course, there was something about confidentiality. He was able to say whatever he liked, and we weren't able to combat it. And so it culminated in him standing outside the church one day, handing out leaflets to people, telling them what an awful person I was, writing letters to the Echo. And it was just very difficult. And all the time, the other trustees were going, it's not worth it. And I'm going, it's worth it. It's worth it. And alongside that, in our congregation, which wasn't a large congregation, we had 9 people that died in a year.
Ooh.
And so, any person dying is a tragedy. But when someone in your congregation dies, it's personal, as it were. You know them. You're taking the funeral, and you know this person, and everybody's upset. But when you have 9 in the space of 12 months, it does get you down. So I think it was a mixture of all those things happening at the same time. And this youth worker would stick notes to my door at 10:30 on a Friday night, and stupidly I would read them. So of course that didn't sort of put you in a good mood. In terms of coping with that, well, there's just that sense of, obviously it made you pray in a way that you'd not prayed before. Just having a sense of say, God, please help me get through this day. You kind of dreaded a phone call because it might be someone else that had died. I think having a congregation that were loving and kind, they knew what was going on, they knew about this guy, so they were also able to, to speak up. Having 4 children and a wonderful wife, that also helps, just to switch off and to do normal things and to say, the big picture here is, of course, there's going to be some disturbance here. I wouldn't say it was spiritual attack, but I mean, things aren't always straightforward, and things are never straightforward, and that was certainly the case. And I think it was just holding on to God and saying, so God, what are you saying to me in this? And I think rather than pretending it didn't exist or running away from it, facing it, accepting it, and learning to be stronger in faith through it. So as I look back at it now, it was a really important life lesson, although it was hard at the time.
I asked you if there was any issue that really disturbs you today. And you said the abortion of babies with disabilities up to birth. Tell me about your reason for that.
So just a bit of history on that. I mean, the first thing I want to say is that abortion is a very emotive subject, and I'm aware that there might be people listening in or watching in later on who will have had an abortion. So I don't want anyone to feel judged or anything like that, because it's a very, very tricky issue. Obviously, it's personal to me in the sense that if my mum, if in the 60s they had scans, I might have been scanned, and my mum and dad might have been said, there's no hope for this child.
Yeah.
You're going to struggle to bring them up. And I might not have been born.
Yeah.
And I would have been disappointed by that.
Yeah. But you're never going to know that.
Exactly, exactly. And of course, when I think it was back in the 80s or 90s, government were considering the number of weeks gestation for abortion, and I think they raised it or lowered it from 28 to 24, or something like that. But at the same time that they did that, they also allowed abortion of children with disabilities up until the birth. And for me, I think that's absolutely scandalous. I mean, we should be treated in the same way as everybody else. And of course, just recently, we've got this thing about Down syndrome, and people can test children in the womb, and people are talking about the eradication of children with Down syndrome. And whilst it is a difficult and emotive subject, it's personal for me, because I passionately believe that everybody is unique and made in the image of God. Psalm 139 is my psalm. It's the most powerful one, in which the psalmist said to God, "Your eye saw my unformed body. You knit me together in my mother's womb." And so, as a church, as a Christian, I want to hold on desperately in every area of life to the uniqueness and the preciousness of each individual. So that's why when you talk about every issue, you could say we've taken back to that. It's quite true. So when we see people starving today and we have food banks, when we have climate change and people's homes are being affected, it all comes down to the uniqueness. And so any life that's lost is of great sadness, and wherever there's pain, that's always a great sadness. So for me, that remains the scandal. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be abortion, but that people with disabilities seem to me in a much more vulnerable situation, and that's why I feel quite strongly about it.
Okay. Tell me about your daughter Lily and an incredible answer to prayer when she was just 2 years old.
So we're lucky to have a house in Anglesey, and we were there for a few days, and we have a bridge across a little stream, and she was playing on the bridge and somehow or other fell off the bridge into the stream. Now, it's not a fast-flowing stream, but it's got rocks in the stream, and Lily fell right in between two quite large rocks and just fell on the stream bed, which was just mud. So apart from being shocked, and it was only about a 4 or 5 foot fall, apart from being quite shocked and a bit dirty, she was uninjured. And it was amazing, because if she had gone a few inches to the left or the right, it could have been a lot more serious, and we would have had to certainly take her to hospital and lots of blood and everything. So a couple of days later, her godfather rang us up and said, "Hi, how are you? You all well?" I said, yeah, we're fine, thank you. And he said, "Oh, that's good, because 2 nights ago," he said, "I had a dream, and in the dream something terrible happened to my goddaughter, Lily. So with you saying that everything, so when I had that dream, I thought I'd better pray for her. So I'm just ringing up now to see that everything's all right." I said, yeah, it's fine. But funny you should say that, Alan. And we told him this story. And we believe, because Alan had the dream, acted on the dream, and prayed for her, that she was all right. Can't prove it, of course, but that's what we believe. And, we're very grateful to God and to Alan that he did that.
How were you involved with the appointment of the present Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby?
Okay, so one of the responsibilities I've had in the church is being on the General Synod. And when you're on the General Synod, they do elections for central members of what's called the Crown Nominations Commission, who appoint diocesan bishops and archbishops. And so I was on from 2007 to 2012. And at the end of 2011, Archbishop Rowan announced that he was going to be standing down. And we worked out that the last appointment we were going to make was of the Archbishop of Canterbury. So I was one of the central members that did that appointment. And if you told us before we started that exercise that we'd end up appointing someone, who'd only been a diocesan bishop for 18 months, we all would have laughed at you.
Yeah.
Because we didn't believe it ourselves. But as as we discussed and talked about the needs of the church and who could fulfill that, Justin's name began to emerge. And so we ended up calling him for interview. We interviewed him, and at the end of the day, it was quite a straightforward decision for us to make, because we knew what we were looking for, and he was the person that fitted that quite closely. So it was quite a responsibility, and of course, you know, I often thought to myself, if I went into a betting shop and put some money on him, I'm going to get a lot of money. But it probably would have come out and it would not have looked good. So, because there's a gap between when you actually make the decision and to the announcement. And so that would have been the odds on him was probably very long. But anyway,
okay.
I resisted.
Right. I want to throw in a general interest question, okay? Today, you're the Archdeacon of Sefton and Knowsley, and involved in many aspects of church life, including appointments of clergy, strategy, vision for the future. So I would like to ask you your opinion on this. Where have all the youngers gone, the young people? They aren't here, and everywhere you look, there are Anglican churches being run by older and older people. What should we be doing as Christians to attract younger people into church life?
Well, that's a very good question. I think that society has changed, so Sundays are a different day to the way that they used to be. So I think there's a real question about whether we are going to be able to attract them to our Sunday services. I think there's a missing link in the church's outreach to children and young people, and that's parents and grandparents. No child is going to walk to this church or any other church on their own.
Yeah.
They are going to be brought by their parents or their grandparents. So my question, I want to throw it back at you in a way, is to say to all parents and grandparents, you know, they're your children, they are your grandchildren. What is the answer here? Lots of young people talk about their grandma or their granddad in very fond tones.
Big influence.
A big influence. So how are grandma and granddad using their influence in that respect? Yeah. And also, the grandparents will have the answer. They just talk to their teenagers and say, you know, what's going to make you? It is about relationships. I think it's about parents and grandparents sharing their faith and living it out at home. Lots of people will say you don't have to go to church to be a Christian. And, you know, so we're still with that as well. So I think the biggest influence in a child's life are parents and grandparents. It's not the vicar, it's not the Sunday school teacher, it's not even the youth leader, it's parents and grandparents. So somehow or other, I'm not saying we shouldn't have Sunday school leaders or youth leaders. They're really important people in the life of our church, but they can't do it on their own. It's a collective responsibility that we need. We need to be welcoming. We need to be warm. We need to take them seriously. We need to be listening to them. Quite often, I think, some of the stuff that we do is about, and it's happening tonight, you know, that everyone just sits there and listens to someone else droning on about something. Well, actually, people want to ask questions. They want to participate. They want to explore what faith might mean. So we've got to somehow or other make space for young people to do that. Because young people are great. And, you know, it's really important that we engage them. I think where we have schools, I mean, I think we're very good at assemblies in schools. And, you know, everyone goes, oh, the vicar's great when they come into an assembly. But actually, what's that turn into? And, you know, we need to somehow be making young people disciples of Jesus Christ and showing them what it means to live as a 14-year-old as a disciple of Jesus Christ. So it's a big challenge. Whether that, I don't think we should necessarily put all our energies in trying to get them into church, but rather we should meet them on their own terms and, you know, include parents and grandparents in that.
That's helpful, thank you. I want to put something to you that might challenge people who come here with their own problems, their own issues tonight. You've come a long way from the challenges and the difficulties that you were born with, and yet some people find it incredibly difficult to overcome their own issues, especially these days. People come to this event who are struggling with life's issues. What comfort could you give to people from your challenges?
So I think for me, what really changed my life was the simple acknowledgement that I was unique, that I was precious, that I had gifts, that I had a purpose. Didn't quite know what those were, what the gifts were and what the purpose was, but just that sense that God could use me with all the problems, inverted commas, that I'd had. And that has been absolutely crucial. So that's not about denying that there have been difficulties, not about denying the disability or whatever it is that people are struggling with, but it's simply accepting them. And obviously, if it's a physical illness or ailment, to pray for healing and wholeness. I mean, I believe that I've been prayed for that often by people over the years who all fancy, I'm not quite sure what they're thinking of, that my arms are going to grow, am I going to get extra fingers? But actually, wholeness is a much richer experience for me. So for me, wholeness is about accepting the way that I am physically and learning to live with that and not pretending it doesn't exist, not wishing I could be someone else, but I am who I am. And obviously that's a unique Christian insight that God speaks and that Jesus showed by his death on the cross. So I think that's what I would say to people. Also, I mean, I've been prayed for that often by people, physically, but over the years, I know my mum and dad prayed for me every day. My mum still does. And Annie's parents pray for us every day as well. And that's really important. We pray for our kids every night before we go to bed. And so prayer is really important. And you can't get enough prayer. And as I look back over my life, I'm sure that I'm a product of prayer. And I'm really grateful to all those people who have prayed and asked God to work in my life.
Pete, an hour goes far too quickly. One final question. A vacancy, an interregnum, which we're in, is always a difficult time for any church, and particularly for the church wardens. So as a final question, what message would you like to leave with the people here tonight in our situation?
So I think, first of all, to the church wardens, I'd say it's your chance to shine.
Cheers.
I think I think the first thing to do is to remember that this is God's church. And it's not, A's church or B's church or C's church. It's God's church. And I think the really critical question is, where are you in this particular church? Where are you in your life? In your journey, and we're all on a journey, and this church is on a journey, where are you now? And where do you want to be? What's your vision about the future? And those are really, really important things to work out and to be honest about where you are, because sometimes you discover you're not where you think you should be. And I don't know whether you've done your parish profile yet or not, but if you haven't, speak to those people who never come to St Mary's Upton and ask them what they would look for in a next vicar, or what they think of St Mary's Upton. Because, seeing how other people see you is really important. Because when you're on the inside, you don't always see that for yourself. So that's what I would say. Also ask your children and young people about where they think the church is as well. Because from what I've just said, that's going to be an important part. I think the other thing is, I would say, in terms of whoever the new vicar is going to be, simply just trust the process. That's a favourite phrase that I use about all these things, is that God is in control. And, what you don't want to do is you don't want to, make decisions too early or too quick. You don't want to imagine what it's going to be. You don't want to even think, well, if 50 people don't apply for this job, there's something wrong with us. Don't worry about it. You only need one person to apply for the job. You don't need 50. The really important thing would be, where are you and where do you want to go? And then you can work out who is the right person to get us where we want to go. And I think that's just the final thing I may say is that you are the church of God even without a vicar. You know, and
Yes, I
so
do, yeah.
just remember that. You know, there's this myth that you're not the church without a vicar. It's absolute rubbish. I don't think Jesus didn't come to found a church. He came to build a community of disciples. And, you know, we make disciples, he builds the church. So let's just concentrate on making disciples and let's leave him to build the church. So if we all concentrate, so I'm going to finish now, I'm sorry Dave. You concentrate here on making disciples and leave the church to Jesus Christ. You'll be fine.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pete Spiers.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you very much.
As I sit here and look around at all of you, and I think of the competition to what's on the television at the moment, it is fantastic to see so many people. But I know, and you know, how much we get from listening to a guy like Pete. Nikki's going to come out now and close the evening in prayer.
Thanks, Shay. They're all here because they're trying to get out of Latin homework. You realise that, don't you? Pete and Annie don't lack courage, actually, and nor do their children, who we had a little bit of debate over there about what their ages are, Pete. So Annie's got a few tips for you on remembering your children's ages. But I'm going to pray for you and Annie, and for Hannah, and for Callum, and for Lily and Dylan, and also for us here. As David says, we're in a time of vacancy. We are like the Chinese. We're living in interesting times, and we're being stretched. But I'm going to pray for courage. I'm also going to give the flowers, not to you, because there's no red in them. So I'm going to give them to Annie, but I'm going to pray first, if that's okay. Now, I'm also going to pray a prayer that you should have heard in Liverpool Diocese, which I have to say is not God's own diocese. That's Chester Diocese. And this is a prayer for courage, and it's a prayer that actually says to us all that we don't know what the future holds, but we go into the future trusting God to lead us. So, Lord God, you have called your servants to adventures of which we cannot see the ending, by paths as yet untrodden, through dangers unknown. Give us faith to go out with good courage, not knowing where we go, but only that your hand is leading us and your love supporting us. And we ask these things through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Bless you both. All six of you, actually. Well, whatever their ages are.
Don't forget to stay, have a chat, come and have a word with Pete if you want, or his wife Annie, who's here, and please stay for tea and coffee, which will be served where you are. Thank you.